back and spoke.
I'm coming out here so you can look at me and hear what I have to say, and then make up your own minds as to whether you believe some of the same things that have been said about your president.
He was likable. Up close, he was likable.
I suppose you'd like to meet my family.
He involved Mrs. Truman and daughter Margaret every way possible.
This is the boss.
Introducing them as the boss. And Margaret as the boss's boss. And they would grin and wave. It was fun.
There you have it.
Meanwhile, back on the Victory Special, Dewey is sticking to the script.
His speeches became so full of empty bromides and just silly nonsense, saying things like, your future is bright, very bright indeed.
The unity we need for the nation will be practiced in the nation's capital.
They were empty and meaningless.
Peace of the world will only be secure when the forces on the side of peace are stronger than the forces on the side of evil.
It was hard to really disagree with anything Dewey said. I mean, who could be against peace and prosperity and working together?
Dewey is playing it safe, and why not? He's still way ahead in the polls. Time is running out for Harry Truman. Finding a 2 months until the election, and Truman still trails Dewey.
I've been in politics a long time. But it makes no difference what they say about you if it isn't so.
But behind his folksiness, Truman's playing a shrewd political game.
They've never been able to prove it on me.
Behind the scenes, this spontaneous man of the people had a team of researchers who had studied every single place that Truman stopped and had provided briefings.
Democratic headquarters send daily briefings back to the train.
At every town, every place he was going to stop, we had 3 or 4 pages of information that Truman could look at, grasp quickly, and be ready to talk directly to that community.
When he got out there, he knew who the people were in town that had done well. He knew what Democrats were running for what office and how to mention them. He knew that the high school football team had done really well. He knew that they just built a new bridge.
In Austin, a big crowd greets the president as he continues his campaign for Lone Star State's 23 electoral votes. Pressing civil rights.
There were 4 or 5 or 6 issues that were very much in the forefront of people's minds. And he was going to do something about them. Oh, it was truly extraordinary.
The gap is closing between Dewey and Truman, but not quickly enough.
I could tell from the crowds and the newspapers and so on that he was steadily gaining, but quite frankly, I did not think we had time to do it.
Truman wraps up the offensive.
He hits below the...
One phrase. Big business first.
He comes out and says, the Republicans are fat cats. They're in the pocket of Wall Street. They don't care about you, the farmer. They don't care about you, the worker.
Harry Truman talked a lot about the worker and about the people who put in a hard day's work, not the fancy folks that are having fancy dinners and running Wall Street. Those are Dewey's folks. They're the ones the Republicans are going to take care of. Implicit in that is, I'm the one who's going to take care of you.
Give the Republicans complete control of this government, and we'll start on a boom and bust cycle and try to go through just what we did in the 20s, and end up with a crash.
He built an alliance with the American people against an unpopular Congress. Basically, I'm enlisting you to take on this do-nothing Congress.
This Congress has not done anything for the country.
It worked beautifully. And he really had that image of him before.
President Truman carrying his fight for a continuance of Democratic rule into Southern California is hailed by thousands in Los Angeles, Gilmore State.
Truman's climbing the polls. There's now just 5 points.
By gosh, if we only had 2 more weeks, I think he could put it over.
Governor Dewey moved into the same Los Angeles.
Dewey knew he was slipping. He sensed, just in the crowds, a lack of enthusiasm. Your crowds are supposed to get more enthusiastic as you get closer to election. And the opposite was the case with the victory special. In the executive mansion, he asked to have newsreels. Sitting there in the dark room, he watched the crowds. And he looked at the faces in the crowds. And he came away confirmed in his belief that there was a spark missing.
A week later, speaking in Chicago, Truman's attack goes one step too far.
What are these forces that threaten our way of life? Who are the men behind them?
Truman compares the Republican backers of Dewey to the shadowy financiers who backed Hitler during World War II.
3 years after the war, he's describing the Republicans as fascists.
The Republican Party, if you please, is a serious threat to the future welfare of this great nation.
That is an incredible charge to make against the Republican candidate for President of the United States, coming from the Democratic President of the United States.
Dewey sensed an opening, an opportunity. He said, you know, I should take the gloves off. I should have taken them off a long time ago. And he was willing to consider what would have been a radical shift of strategy.
Truman's outlandish attack on Thomas Dewey gives the Republican candidate a chance to hit back.
He had a speech written. It would have arraigned the Truman administration for all of its perceived failings. It should replace a failed president with a new president.
But it backfired.
Dewey, when he ran in 1944, was widely accused of being too negative and too harsh in his attacks on Roosevelt.
So instead of doing what instinct told him, he took a poll. He polled all 50 members of the Republican National Committee, and virtually unanimously, back came the response.
Don't create a ripple. Don't undo what you got, and don't upset the apple cart.
Dewey's wife and his friends from home keep saying, oh no, you gotta be presidential, you gotta be presidential. Don't attack, you're fine.
The polls back this up. Dewey is set for the White House. Election day. The New York Times predicts a Dewey victory with 350.
Went to vote at a school nearby. He doffed his hat, smiled, and they walked for 6 blocks back to the hotel where Governor Dewey had a suite. And the Republicans expected that there would be a presidential concession before 9 o'clock that evening.
Truman goes back to Missouri to await the results and disappears.
It is so Harry Truman. He sneaks out, literally sneaks out of the house, and goes with just a couple of Secret Service agents way up to Excelsior Springs, which is north of Kansas City, has a ham and cheese sandwich and a glass of buttermilk, and goes to bed on the night of the election.
While Truman sleeps, the campaign.
By 3, 4 in the morning, it was all coming down to California and Ohio.
With Ohio's 25 electoral votes, President
Truman will have a total of 266 votes in the electoral college. This is the minimum figure necessary for victory.
The Democratic Party has returned victorious. President Truman, the elected president.
Truman has achieved the unthinkable. He's won.
Truman's asleep. So Secret Service man wakes him up.
And saw someone there and just made the observation, the son of a bitch won.
Governor Thomas E. Dewey today conceded the presidential election to President Truman.
I sent the following wire to President Truman. My heartiest congratulations to you on your election and every good wish for a successful administration.
It was one of those things I can remember, just like when John Kennedy was shot. I mean, you just couldn't believe what had happened.
I don't think there has ever been a bigger shock than when the vote came in.
No question the media was shocked. Yeah, but I'm not sure. Obviously, America couldn't have been too shocked. They voted.
So the morning comes and Truman has won. The first thing he has to do is get back to Washington. And he takes his train back. And in St. Louis, someone comes on the train and hands Truman the newspaper. The Chicago Tribune printed the headline, "Dewey defeats Truman."
The American people have given Truman a landslide victory, 303 electoral votes.
As excited as anybody else when he actually did.
At the end of the day, it shows that it's not up to the experts, it's not up to the reporters, it's not up to the pundits, it's not up to the pollsters, it's up to the American people.
I will say to you that I expect to work just as hard as I have the job up to date, do it to the best of my ability.
This election, one candidate has said, I'm going to fight like Truman and give him hell.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about this, get your opinion. What do you guys think? Think about this a minute. We got a couple minutes. What was Dewey's biggest problem?
Didn't know what he was saying.
His problem.
He was a little cocky.
True what?
He was a little cocky.
He was a little cocky, he was a little overconfident. He was kind of maybe seen as kind of harsh or stiff, and Truman kind of just hit you between the eyes. But it was an interesting election, and hopefully you picked this up, is that Truman didn't campaign against Dewey almost the whole time. He campaigned against the Republican Congress the whole time, saying, if you elect a Republican president, this is what you're going to get. Not only did it turn the tide in the presidency, it also turned the tide in the Congress, because who won the Congress by virtue of the election of 1948? The Democrats did. The only time he got after Dewey was with 2 weeks left, and he compared his supporters to those that supported Hitler during the time. And what was Dewey's biggest mistake there? Didn't attack back. He got together with his Republican supporters, even talked to his family, and they said, no, be presidential. You were deemed as too negative against Roosevelt in 40, and he really maybe felt conservative because he really did think he was going to win. Even the speechwriter for Truman thought that Truman was going to lose clear up to the election because he ran out of time, and in essence, he crushed him. Here's what I thought was interesting. He ran an ad, kind of, and they were going to show it where? Movie theaters. Can you imagine that today? Who was Dewey's vice presidential running mate? Do you remember? Governor of California, Earl Warren, who was going to end up being the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who's going to be the head of the Warren name that we're going to talk about later when we get into the cabinets. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I think it was a very good synopsis. So go ahead and pass your books to the front if you would. We'll keep them here, the Bailey Gibbons rule. Bailey, you got a bad back today?
No, I have to use the restroom very badly. Okay. I think.
You can take it with you. Is this just easier if we just leave the books here? Yeah. This is partially the Carter King rule. Bailey takes hers home and loses them, and Carter leaves hers here. Did you guys pick up Nick's? Hey, Cody, throw me Nick's there. read through it.
I still haven't got that. Where are they? Like at the
Interesting
register?
election though, I hope you enjoyed it.
On the regular? On that podium thing? On the other side of the door? Like, okay, you know where the enter? Right there? Not on the Okay, so on the other side of the door. I was looking at something. Okay, you were going to use for that. I was waiting in the morning. Okay, so they still there. I haven't seen them, but they should be. I don't like rice.